and I take great pleasure in turning the microphone over to Mr. Ian Clifford for his presentation.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much, Stuart. I just want to take a moment before I get started to emphasize how happy and pleased I am that Dick Weir is here with us today. I first met Dick on a beautiful summer day in Montreal in 2002, and it's been a fascinating journey from that point to this point. And I can tell you that the last year in the history of both companies, for me, has been by far the most interesting, compelling, and exciting time for the organizations. And we are working together so closely now, as evidenced by our name change, but you'll see from the actions that we're taking and have taken over the last year, how effectively the organizations are working together, and that's very important for everyone to acknowledge. So I'll just, once again, if we could just give a round of applause for Dick for making the trip up. That's great. Our mission statement, which has evolved extensively over the last year, really puts into perspective the broad range of opportunity that eStore's technology represents. And over the last 12 months, we've taken a number of very important steps towards the realization and foundation of our next steps forward with the technology. And I'll talk about those now, so we can skip forward. When Stuart and I took the reins back last May and sat down with Dick and with Tom in Cedar Park, we spent a tremendous amount of time focusing in on what the key issues would be in the coming 12 months and how we would meet our objectives in that time period. First and foremost, we understood that there was I'll call it an uncertainty in the market in terms of how the technology was being represented, who was testing the technology, and how independent results were being presented to the market. So we thought a lot about what steps we needed to take. And the first thing that we did was we worked with a double PhD at the University of Texas, who shall remain nameless because I know he'll get 1,000 emails if I name him. But we brought him in personally to the organization to spend time developing an internal protocol that both companies, eStore and ZENN, could be very, very comfortable with and supportive of the results of that work. Following that, we made the decision that we needed to find an internationally recognized, absolutely credible testing organization to conduct independent validation for us on an ongoing basis, not just a one-off. We wanted to work with an organization that could support the technology in the months and years to come. Through various recommendations and discussions, as you all know, we landed on Intertek, who is London-based, represented globally, extremely skilled testing protocols, and Intertek came in, took a look at where we were at, and designed, independent of us, a testing protocol regime utilizing their own equipment and processes that we could feel extremely confident in the results. That was an essential part of the equation in the last 12 months. We started a 6-month project to really set the foundational initial phase 1 testing with Intertek, which you're all familiar with. On December 17th, we published the results of Intertek that really looked at a very broad spectrum of the strengths of the technology and where we believed we could go with the technology. Also, at the same time, we made the decision that we needed some independent market validation regarding the technology. We needed somebody independent who was extremely well-versed and qualified to look at the results at Intertek and also help characterize the significance of the level of technology development as it related to various potential markets for eStore. We chose Dennis Zogby, who you've all read about as our primary consultant, somebody with over 25 years of experience in the market, really the go-to person in the industry to understand market segmentation, market size, and potential opportunity for eStore going forward. As you know, Dennis published a 130-page report that was published alongside Intertek's Phase 1 report in December of last year, which was extremely well received, and it was a great basis building point for us. Also in the year, we did a couple of financings. A number of you in the audience participated in those financings, I know. Thank you very much for your support. But we did a couple of small financings. Given the depressed value of the stock, we didn't want to raise too much money. We wanted to raise enough money to keep the programs moving forward fully so that we wouldn't get into a heavily dilutive situation for our shareholders. So that explains the scale and size of financings that we undertook during 2014 and early 2015. As you know, we just published the results of Intertek's Phase 2 testing, which was taking our stacked technology from a 250-volt threshold up to a 750-volt threshold. So basically a threefold increase in the performance of the technology. Because, as you all know, the final form product of eStore's technology is a stacked capacitor. So we need to be able to demonstrate the ability to stack the technology effectively, thereby building up the performance characteristics of the technology. Today we are limited to a hand stacking process, so we can effectively stack a maximum of 6 layers effectively in our facility, and I'll talk to our next steps in terms of robotics work that is underway right now in Cedar Park, which I'm sure you all find very interesting. In addition, this year, we spent some time on the branding of eStore. We figured it was time to actually launch a strong image and corporate identity for eStore, which had a holding page for the last 8 years, and now, as part of the coming out of the technology, we felt a launch was in order. And Marek Warenkiewicz, who's one of the early founders of Feel Good Cars and a tremendous graphic designer who's in the audience here today, led that activity. Developed some really great options for us, and the Energy Everywhere tagline was a creation of Marek's, and we're all extremely pleased with that. Next slide. So you're all very curious what the next 6 months look like for the company, obviously, and that's what we want to focus on today, and certainly I know your questions will hone in on our activities. So I've divided it into 2 aspects: the technology development and our business development, our market development, and our partnership discussions, because all of you are extremely curious about those, I'm sure. I mentioned the robotic stacking capability. The equipment is in-house, being programmed now. Our next levels of Intertek testing will involve robotic-built stacks, so in significant multiples of layering that we have conducted to date. That will be extremely formative data, and very, very informative data, and important data for our partners, all of whom are looking for production quality prototypes that indicate the ability to scale the technology effectively. So we are highly, highly focused on that, and Dick can speak to the progress of that as we conclude. Also, we're looking at polymer development, advanced polymer development. This is an ongoing project. Dick is doing an extensive amount of work now internally at the organization, looking at new formulations of polymer, which is significant as we improve the capacitance of our technology, but also as we look at high energy density applications or energy storage applications for the technology. We've identified a team of very sophisticated polymer chemists from Akron, Ohio, of all places, and we will be announcing that project as we go forward. And of course, once again, testing with Intertek as we produce better results and publishing those results going forward. Patent protection, of course, is a huge part of our intellectual property value within the company. We have robust coverage now, and we have a very detailed and ongoing program for patent protection. And we've got a great set of attorneys that we've been working with now for a number of years, protecting our assets on behalf of all of us. Other aspects that are important, costing is extremely important as we start our partnership discussions. Obviously, if any of you recall the interview with Dennis Ogby from late last year, he indicated that the industry is focused on three primary aspects of capacitor technology, and it was cost, and cost. So our ability to prove unequivocally that our cost base is significantly lower than the competition is an important aspect of what we're doing. We will be disclosing that, of course, that work as we go forward as well. But it's a very big part of our discussions and negotiations with partners because cost is a huge driver in the industry. And of course, Intertek is standing by for multiple phases of testing, designing new protocols for new tests that we'll be asking them to conduct for us in the coming weeks and months. In terms of business development, you probably all would have noticed in the press release from last Thursday that the achievement of stability at 750 volts in a stacked component was an important trigger for Dennis Ogby in terms of his confidence in the technology and to move forward with the discussions within his network. Of course, you're all aware that we have other relationships, existing historical relationships within eStore as well, who have tremendous interest in these achievements as well, and we're furthering those discussions today going forward. We can't talk about specific names at this point. All I can tell you is that the discussions are active, and we will publish at the point when we have agreements at the level that our partners are comfortable with us publishing the relationships. But it's an absolutely key part of our plan in the next 6 months is to ensure that the strength of partnership is reflected in the company. We understand that that's what everyone is looking for. They want to know that we've got industry support and partnership relationships that will add tremendous value to the story, which will be beneficial to all of us. One thing that I'm very anxious to begin in the coming weeks is a international roadshow where we will talk to analysts and financial institutions in the key markets globally who are extremely tuned into the capacitor industry. And this is a great opportunity for us to get the story out to a much broader audience, to get new coverage on the story, because we've reached the point now where we believe we have something that will compel and entice those types of individuals to cover the stock. And that's, of course, a big and very important aspect of building the value in the story, which has been lacking dramatically historically. So that's going to be a very, very important activity in the coming weeks and months. Part of that, of course, it also involves some of Dennis Ogby's connections as well within those financial markets, because, as I said earlier, he is very much the go-to person in terms of market scale and identifying that market. He is sought after on an ongoing and constant basis as it relates to analyzing the existing market and the growth of the existing markets. So those relationships are very important. Coming out of that, we will invite analysts down to eStore. The best way, obviously, and the analysts who are in the audience can definitely attest to this, is you've got to get into the facility, you've got to get behind the door, you've got to see that this is not a laboratory, this is a production facility. So for the few of you who have been down there, you can share your experiences with the audience, but Dick and company have worked incredibly hard to build a scalable production facility. This is not a laboratory. This is the whole intention of the technology is that it is easily scalable within the context of manufacturing, and that's a really critical thing. And that's why we want to get analysts who are very familiar with the space into the facility, able to really understand what's being done and be able to report and write about that in detail. The other two things that we're looking at, which are relevant to some of you in the audience, is right now, as you know, ZENN, I should say the eStore Corporation, owns just over 71% of the common shares of eStore. So there's still about just under 30% of the common stock of eStore privately held. Our intention is to explore the most effective way of consolidating the companies together so that we are one single public company without the overhang of the private ownership. And that's in everyone's best interest. And it's an we'll make it an opportunistic activity for us. Part of that, from my perspective at least, is we would look to a U.S. listing as well. Clearly, the lion's share of the activity is going to be U.S.-based. The technology development today is in the U.S. Many of the partnerships will exist within the U.S., and it makes sense for us to have a public exposure on a U.S. exchange. So, in summary, we've got a lot to do in the next 6 months. It's going to be a very, very busy time for us. We've hired some individuals at eStore. We will continue hiring senior level people at eStore. I mentioned the fact that we will support Dick, certainly in the advanced polymer work, as much as we can. That, of course, being a very significant activity for the company. Ultimately, we want to get to high energy densities and to prove that technology works and to have it set for commercialization. That's very, very important, and the polymer project is a big part of that. And I think that summarizes. Yeah, that summarizes. So I think what we'll do now, we'll move on to questions and answers, and the format of this is we'll alternate between questions from the floor and questions from the webcast, and feel free to direct your questions wherever you would like them answered, and we'll moderate that process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as Ian said, we're going to take questions. I would ask if you have a question, first of all, to go to the microphone and mention your name, and we'll alternate between the webcast and the audience, and we'll start with the audience. If there's anybody who has a question, please feel free to go to the microphone. I can line up and we'll just take one. Your name, sir?
My name is Jerry Wisnia. I've been a stockholder since 2007. Excuse me, got a cold. Ian mentioned that the desire was not to raise too much capital at this point in time, so create a liquidation. Which brings to mind my question, and having no technical expertise whatsoever, I was a bit surprised when all the good news has come out over the last few months, the two Intertech reports and the Zogby report. And yet, based on the minimal increase in the share price, it would seem that the market reacted with a collective yawn. And I'm just wondering, what do you think, what would you attribute that to, number one? And number two, what might it take to jog the interest of the market and the time frame for that potentially happening?
Yeah, Ian, you could take that one.
Yeah, no, sure, absolutely. It's a good question, and I wish I had a crystal ball that could answer it. But the only context, the initial release in December was challenging because it was a pretty massive document. There was a lot to digest in that, and it also came out just before Christmas, the holiday break. So it was a difficult time of market, but we had received our results at that time, and we were obligated, obviously, to disclose at that time. But to answer your question more specifically as it relates to the next 6 months of activity, I believe firmly that we have to broaden the audience for this story. Right now, it is somewhat limited, it is somewhat insular, and I believe with the results that we're achieving today and with the prospect of real independent third-party partnerships that we can bring to the table, that there will be a lot more interest in the story. It'll develop a much more dynamic, measurable quality to it. So I expect that with new analyst coverage and with partnerships announced, we'll see a much more dramatic response in the market. But that's just my own personal belief.
Are we talking months or years? Or?
I think we're talking as long as it takes to get new analysts in and have them interested and up to speed to cover the stock. I also believe that the timing in terms of partnership discussions, if you follow what Dennis Ogby has said, the market is extremely aggressive to new technologies. They will act very, very quickly to basically to tie up the technology. They want to get first to market. They want to have as much access to the technology as possible. So they will move quickly. How quickly, I can't tell you today. But as we enter into these meetings over the coming weeks in Cedar Park, we'll be able to report back very quickly on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. A question from the webcast was, what will the new symbol be for the new corporation? And the answer is we can't say it right now. It has to be disclosed publicly, and we're trying to get the right symbol. But it will be done and disclosed quite quickly once we go through the regulatories. So we now have a question from Mr.
Gary Johnson.
Gary.
This is fantastic. I don't know if Dick will respond.